All right, we are live. So this week, I have Thomas Sheridan. He is a filmmaker and an author. He's written several books. Would you say that the main genre would be esotericism and the psychopathy? Am I seeing? Hang on. Sorry about that audio. I it just came in. So would you say that that would be the general genre that you write, or the
Alternative folklore. I've been described as an alternative folklorist by people, and I think that's a pretty good way of looking at it, whether it's work into like mind control, pathological individuals and systems, or ancient sites, folklore, mythology. They all kind of blend into one when you start looking at them through kind of archetypal eyes. It all becomes a kind of folklore in the end.
right? And actually, I discovered you maybe about a few months ago, or it was sometime earlier this year, through your YouTube channel, where you talk about this stuff. And I'd say that one of the main things that had me hooked on your stuff was, when you were talking about NPCs, and when you were talking about uh, Corazon C33. I've never heard of that, and just it just seems like a lot of the things that you've been talking about, it's either things that I've been thinking about or saying. So it just, since then I've been hooked. And recently I have watched one of your videos on liminal spaces, and that's a subject that has always fascinated me. Now, recently, I didn't really know there was a specific term for it exactly. I've always called it just in betweenness. But I guess where we could start off, with the stream is, defining what is a liminal space. And I remember in your video, you were saying that it's a feeling as if that you're walking in between two realities, and you feel as if you're a ghost wandering. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I have been thinking more about that and why that is, because I recall in your video you were saying that you never had experienced you never had a liminal experience since until post 9/11. And I got to thinking,
Yeah.
why is that? So I
Well,
was
the world changed.
oh, go ahead.
Well, the world changed forever after 9/11. There's this enormous psychic shock of people all over the world watching the events unfold live, and it created a sort of a wave function collapse in the quantum field, I believe, that basically threw humans into a kind of an altered timeline, as a way of putting, or an altered state of consciousness, where we ended up where we shouldn't have been. Where that's why the 80s and the 90s feel so alien when you see them now. We're actually in a kind of an altered state of consciousness, and a different sort of like psychic paradigm. And so those of us, there were two kinds of people. There were ones that went along with the programming, and there was other ones who sort of noticed that the world was a very strange place afterwards, and getting stranger. I think even a lot of normal people now are quote unquote normal people are even starting to realize there's a bizarre strangeness in the world right now. But I think sensitive people who are attuned to these kinds of ideas, people who are interested in, the occult and esoteric stuff, we're starting to notice it much, much earlier. So yeah, I cannot remember. I can remember walking through. I went to the school that I went to, the secondary school, what you call high school, should have been a liminal space, and I can remember walking through the long corridors at night, but not having the same feeling. I remember walking through old, empty hotel, corridors and office buildings, but it wasn't until about the late 27s, 8, 9s that I started to feel strange in these places, that they felt like they were answering a mystery as to why things were strange. And it was almost like it felt this kind of, an in-between feeling. And what reality am I in? I often would have the feeling, am I actually experiencing this? Am I here right now, or am I dreaming it? And it was always the same kind of locations. It was like and I had, I'd been aware of this sort of aesthetic from watching Stanley Kubrick films that have it, like The Shining and the hotel corridors, and 2001: A Space Odyssey, the empty spaceship, and it was always used in cinema. I was used in photography, and it was used in art too. And a lot of Edward Hopper paintings have that vibe.
Yeah, and David Lynch too.
Yeah, David Lynch, big time. Yeah, and massively so. And so it started to feel like less of a kind of an artistic exploration and more of a psychological one, more of a mystical one, more of I'm aware of something here. There's something happening, and it's having an effect on me. And why is it having an effect on me? And then, later on, other people developed the concept and started calling it liminal spaces. And to now, it's quite a big thing on like YouTube and stuff that people describe. And they're generally buildings that have been built after World War II, mainly after the 1950s, a particular kind of postmodernist, brutalistic architecture, long corridors, minimal amounts of furniture, repetitive shapes, lights, corridors that disappear in the darkness around corners. And it's almost like you feel in these environments that you'd feel like you were in the woods, worried if there was a predator around behind the next tree. It almost has that vibe.
Yeah, and actually, I think I remember listening to one of David Paulides' talks on a strange missing 401 cases. I think it was somewhere he had said that when some of these people would disappear, they would, or right before they were about to, or that they might disappear, was they felt as if that everything became fake. Like the forest around them, the moon seemed like a cutout in the sky. Just everything got this really weird, eerie feeling right before something entered their vision. So, in some of these cases, they would go missing, then come back, tell about it, or they would just about go missing, but they would elude it. But there's always that sense of danger, like you said. And I got to thinking about this post 9/11 experience with the liminal spaces. Could 9/11 be? I mean, I know to a lot during that time. I was 7 years old at the time when it happened, and I remember looking around and seeing the adults, and a lot of them they were very freaked out about it. So I see the conscious shock about it, but I kind of wondered if when that had happened, it had translated as something different into the unconscious mind. So, depending on, or maybe even, I guess what I'm saying is that despite what our theories, might be on 9/11, still it was something that happened, like as if, it was part of some ceremony carried out to trigger an effect within the unconscious mind, to maybe make things like liminal spaces occur more frequently. And then too, there's been talk for years about the thinning of the veil. So I wonder, these liminal space experiences, could that be part of this thinning of the veil? And things like 9/11, things like the COVID pandemic, things like Trump election and re-election, are these series of big events causing triggers in the minds, and NPCs? I got to thinking, maybe they're more susceptible to it in terms of anxiety, because maybe they're just not accustomed to those
deeper sensations.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, no, I think a 9/11 thing, like the World Trade Center Plaza, where the Twin Towers was a liminal space itself. I used to walk home, come home at every night and go in it, pass through it most mornings when I worked down there. And I can remember one of the last experiences I had was walking across the plaza between the Twin Towers, and just the wings of a pigeon came spinning around towards the ground. because there's all kinds of falcons and hawks that hunting around the skyscrapers of all over Manhattan, and they hunt pigeons. But it was just this weird thing. It was like one of my last memories of the World Trade Center was these pigeon wings that had been removed from the body, spinning around and falling to the ground. And years later, I realized that that was almost like an omen of what was to come,
Yeah.
or something like that, or it was like an augury or something like that. Definitely, and that was a liminal space. That if you went down there at night, say like around 11 or 12 o'clock, that no one was around, you were very much in that sensation of a liminal space projected vertically. And the way they even built that 9/11 monument at Ground Zero, it's like this abyss, this box that's an abyss. That shows
Yeah,
me
I've been there.
definitely an occultic element to how they were thinking about everything. It reminds me almost like the inversion of the Kaaba at Mecca, the cube inverted into the ground. You know, it was
Uh-huh.
almost like that, and people wander around it in the same kind of magnetic way. You know, not as formal or not as religious, but maybe it is a kind of a religion in its own kind of way. But yeah, I mean, absolutely believe there was something, if not supernatural, about the planning and the actual event itself. It became supernatural very, very quickly. It became you know, a high strangeness event and had effects on the human consciousness right from the get-go. I mean, like even when people were seeing devil faces in the smoke, that was a subconscious mind telling, you know, those famous photographs, you see the smoke going up the building, it looks like a devil face. That was
Yeah.
not so much planned like that, but people will, sensitive people will look for clues and things. And if they have a feeling like this is not what it seems, there's something deeper and darker going on here, their mind will actually create the devil face in the smoke, even though it's there, but make them notice it and look at it for that reason. Say, look, there's something not right here. There's something, you know, there's something deeper going on than what you're being told. And I also think that's in the liminal spaces, that's very similar as well. I think, you know, okay, I'm in a shopping mall. I'm working as a security guard. Or I work in the last store in a shopping mall that closes at night, and it's all locked up. And I'm walking through the corridors, and there's maybe a fluorescent light flickering in the ceiling, and there's just a sound of my own footsteps, and it's remarkably you know, eerie. But there's no reason why it isn't, because it's just you consciously stripped naked in a location where your mind expands. What happens really when there's no people there and it's nighttime? What really happens is your nervous system starts expanding outwards, and you start becoming aware of this space as something far deeper than an empty corridor or an empty, you know, length of space in a shopping mall.
Right. And yeah, I actually had some more questions about it too that I had written down. So about the, I know one of the things that I was wanting to talk about were about cycles. Do you think that these liminal states becoming more common, becoming more of, I guess, more in the public eye, perhaps, more of a trend on YouTube and like that?
You cut out for a second. What's becoming more in the public eye?
Oh, sorry. Liminal states, just the
Oh
whole
yeah,
idea
yeah,
is becoming more
absolutely,
of a trend.
absolutely.
Do you think that that could, like I said, it's almost as if that it's a thinning of the veil that we're witnessing. So, do you think that perhaps it could be nearing the end of a cycle,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah.
the reason why that all these things are coming about? And likewise, the things, these big events have been happening, like 9/11 and COVID and such, obviously, they're not natural events, they've been planned. So do you think that this cycle, that, if we're coming to its end, or maybe even to its peak, I'm not quite sure yet, do you think that it could be something orchestrated by the deep state? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've thought about that. I'm more likely to be of the mind that the deep state or the secret unknowns or whatever they are trying to prevent this collapse into the, in the Kali Yuga. It almost does feel that we're circling the drain of some kind of event horizon. This is where so many strange things are happening now, like Mandela effects and just the fact that even shows like this exist and your channel exists, and there's all kinds of channels like this, and people having these conversations, and people listening to me, there's something happening. There's the synchronicities are off the scale. Just very strange events are happening, and it's just the whole concept of the event horizon on a black hole where it speeds up and speeds up and speeds up. Even young people, even younger than yourself, say to me, time is flying now. It's going so fast. And that was usually something that only people over 60 or 50 or 60 said in the past. But now teenagers are saying it. So we're like circling the drain at high speed,
Mhm.
and we come to this kind of event horizon in the Kali Yuga. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to happen next week or next year. It could take another couple of hundred years, or it could happen next year. We don't know. I mean, there are some gurus in India that do believe that it will happen in 2025, 26. And that's really interesting, consider the other stuff that's coming out now with AI, and now this alien object flying towards Earth that's going to, reach us in 2027. So it's very peculiar, but very interesting times to be living in.
Yeah, it is. And what you said there about this time vortex, about time, speeding up, and it kind of it kind of goes back to, I guess, the the Heideggerian idea of thrownness, what he termed as Geworfenheit, that is a feeling of just being thrown into life, into one's fate, and just having to, I guess, make the most of what of the fate that you've been given. And so I kind of wonder about liminal spaces, how they're even created in the first place, because like I said, it's an in-betweenness, but an in-betweenness of what? Is it an in-betweenness of past and present, of past and future, that's creating this distortion of our sense of time as speeding up?
Yeah,
So
but it's also, let's look at the kind of forms behind it. It's generally a result of post-1950s architecture. Now, there was a general belief that Western civilization was progressing until about the 1960s or 70s, and then something happened, and there's an element of like we got we say, like, you look before at the architectural style before brutalism, which is a lot of these buildings are designed and built upon this sort of like French Marxist brutalism architecture. Before that, it was things like Art Deco, Art Nouveau, Beaux Arts, very beautiful, ornate, and classy and stylish buildings following World War II, rather than using the freedom of the post-war period to begin a kind of a new renaissance. The exact opposite happened. It collapsed into a synthetic, plastic, prefabricated, precast world where cookie cutter houses being built everywhere, suburbs that were all like looking like each other, the same buildings all looking the same. You look at skyscrapers built in the early part of the 20th century in cities like New York or Chicago. They were built as a symbol of art. This is good to have gargoyles. This is like what the not the developer, but the company said, this is what our company represents. It's quality, it's endurance, it's stylish. And now it's just a box thrown up. And the liminal space is us, I think, as being far more highly developed. I mean, us as a species, the ones that can see this stuff, than the actual containers they put us in. And so because of the noise and stress of daily living, say you're in a shopping mall, it's packed,
mhm.
or a hotel room conference is packed. And when it ends at the end of the night, there's a sense of just me and this empty space, me and this nothingness, this in-between world. And I think you have a kind of, it's like hauntological, it ties in very much with hauntology, that you have a longing for a future which never came. The golden future promised after World War II became a plastic prefabricated box. And it happened all over the West, not just in the United States or other Western developed nations. It happened all over the West. And it was a sense that we should have had this golden future, but it wasn't coming. Now, yeah, do they do it for a reason? Absolutely. You look at things like the Frankfurt School and groups like that, and the New School in New York in particular, they had whole teams working towards like this kind of like, they were based on the kind of the art theory concepts of the painter Hans Hofmann in New York, that that this kind of thing, that like things could be stripped down into basic shapes, and there was really no need for anything ornate or anything particularly enriching and that kind of thing. So it was towards a kind of like machine society, but it wasn't a factory. It was not a factory of production of things. It was a factory for the production of a particular kind of consciousness that the establishment and the whatever you want to call them, the secret unknowns, needed us to be. And that's why the government buildings were the first, then the schools, then the universities, the technical colleges, and now even like luxury hotels look like, I was in a hotel in Holland, it's branded as a really upscale hotel in Amsterdam about a couple of years ago, and it was like being in an empty shopping mall. Even even luxury is being defined by these limited spaces.
Yeah, so it's almost as if that it's perhaps, whoever is orchestrating this cleansing of, or this stripping down of the consciousness. It's like it's bringing the masses down to a blank slate for some kind of rebirth, because there's, how should I say it? There seems to be that there's art, and then there's the yearning for art. There's beauty, then there's the yearning for beauty. There's this, and there's a yearning for it. So it's going back down to the bare bones and trying to grow something brand new. And is that a brand new timeline or something? Sorry, I'm getting a knock at the door. I don't
Do you
know
want to
why.
answer? Do you want to answer?
Sorry.
Do you want to answer the door?
Yeah, I'm just gonna do that real quick. I
Yeah.
was not expecting company right now.
I don't know what it could be. Yeah.
Hi.
Is it? What's the best time on Monday? Okay. What about the next day or so forth? I will be here. One? Maybe tomorrow, if not the next day.
All right. Sorry about that. But yeah, what I was saying is there a rebuilding of a brand new timeline that's trying to be done? And I know that from watching other videos, like sometimes I'll watch tarot reading videos, and they'll talk about different timelines that we're accessing this new timeline of our future, or that new one. And so I wonder, well, is this accessing of different timelines just something, kind of superficial new age thoughts going on, or is there something much deeper about it? Because as far as changing a timeline, I don't think it's as easy as what people make it out to be, because a lot of people, they say that any little decision that you make, any little choice, it can create this butterfly effect, for in the future. But I don't really think that each and every choice that we make is equal in value, because certain choices are going to have bigger implications. Other choices, they're just very tiny, petty ones. That's not really that's not going to trigger a big enough ripple in the time-space matrix to really, cause a timeline shift. So I just kind of wonder about if that is what's going on with the trying to transform human consciousness. Like you were saying, down to a basic slate. Of the uniform houses of the standard norming mindset. And um, how they go about art and in architecture. I just wonder if it's for that reason. Because how we understand time, it's based on our perspective, you know. And so time it can speed up or it can slow down based on how on how stressed we are, on how we feel in danger, on how busy we are. So I guess what I'm saying here is just that I wonder about what the end game is. Do you have any thoughts on what that end game could be with
Well,
this?
yeah, like being a pagan, the end game is the beginning of a cycle. At the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. This is central to Indo-European paganism. That cycle, they're different cycles of time and consciousness, and they all pretty much align with the concept that things fall apart, a kind of a social and a psychic entropy kicks in, distortion and confusion, and then it starts to repair itself slowly when you come out of the cycle. Now, this timeline thing, when perhaps we're dead. I know this is another interesting idea that's been floated around, that we've all been killed. Something happened to the earth, and we're all dead, and we're like this is where the sense of hauntology and liminal spaces come on. That we're very literal ghosts, and we don't know it. Like, for instance, I've been reading a lot of stories lately, Victorian ghost stories, and some of them are often written from the viewpoint of the ghost, like a woman who haunts a house and this kind of thing. And the way they describe how the ghost feels in the home is kind of similar to how many of us feel today, that doesn't know if they're here, doesn't know what the time is, doesn't know, the days go really strangely. They notice something not right. The ghost thinks they're still alive, but they get clues to things like the way time moves and changes and is not right. And suddenly one day they wake up in there's different people living in their town that were never there before, and this kind of thing. And so there, if there's such, we could be sort of like quantum ghosts. I don't know if that's a proper term, but we could be those of us who are sort of like looking at this stuff. I don't. While I know there is a kind of a pathological force running this planet, there's no doubt about that. At the same time, we can't believe that that's the only option open to us. This would be kind of self-defeating, and also kind of wouldn't make sense, in that we can choose our destiny to a point. And maybe this feeling that we have, this sense of being in liminal spaces, and also liminal people. I meet lots of liminal people all the time. I'm like, is this person actually real? Do they exist? And just in my daily life, going to the shops and things like that. And I often wondered, like, is the in-between thing literal? That we're already kind of dead in one quantum world and we're moving into another. But in the meantime, we're experiencing the strangeness of reality, this sort of like endless conformity of the world around us. Like, for nothing seems to progress, really. If you look at technology, nothing has really progressed since the 60s. There's been nothing new. There's only been miniaturization and improved versions of what already existed in everything from electronics, you name it. But nothing brand new has appeared since the 60s. What we have now has always has existed right until the early 60s. So there's been no technological advancement. You can say things like AI, they're just advances of existing computer systems and networks. They're not something brand new. They're not something completely new. So
It's like a limbo.
yeah. So we're just sort of like, and then there's this standardization of the world around us. Like, the way cars all look the same. You ever notice that, like, all the cars today on the road look more or less the same shape? Where if you look at photographs of cars in the 70s and old movies and stuff, there's every make, shape, color everywhere. Yeah, even today, when someone makes a TV show or a music video, they won't put in the latest Toyota or Hyundai. They'll always have like a classic Ford Mustang or some older car. Even in regular TV shows that are set today, you'll often see them driving in an old Volvo or Mercedes from the 1970s. It's almost like they're mocking us or something like that. It's like you know, it's, or else we're seeing how the world. It's like when we watch a TV show and suddenly they're driving really nice looking cars, like from the past, like Mustangs and things like that, Cadillacs, and when they all had individual shapes and stuff like that, or MGs or old Austins and stuff like that. It's like in another reality has it actually gone on, has it continued on, and we're stuck. Those of us are stuck in this kind of liminal reality where everything is conforming itself and compressing itself into the same thing, the same blob, the same, everything looks the same, and is this part of the way out of it? It's almost like we're noticing, okay, we're not moving along with the rest of the world, or the world has stopped, or we've moved on. Maybe that's more likely, I think, that the world has stopped and we've moved on, and we're actually, we're actually, that's why we feel like outsiders in the world that we live in.
That makes sense. And I remember reading about in a book about Wilhelm Reich, the famous psychoanalyst, biologist. He was talking about storms, about how storms are created. So he was saying that it's two orgone streams, and of course, the orgone being the essence of life. It's a life force. That's how he had defined it. When two orgone streams collide with each other, one stream tries to superimpose upon the other, basically trying to consume the other. And from this struggle, from this battle going on between the orgone streams, it creates friction, and that friction is what creates moisture in the atmosphere. And then that's how it starts to rain and starts to storm. And that happens until one stream completely consumes the other, and then they both divide out into two brand new equal orgone streams, and they go away, and so the storm goes away. And the reason why I mention this is because I wonder if this can be the same thing as what's happening with realities, that you have two realities colliding, one's trying to consume the other. And so there's this sense of like a storm of reality, things getting mixed up, getting confused, and things not really advancing, as you were saying, just kind of stuck in this limbo state of just kind of waiting around, like waiting for the storm to subside. And
yeah, that works for me. I've never heard that theory, Wilhelm Reich's theory of the two orgone streams colliding. That's very interesting. I've never heard that one. And the way you describe it, so one tries to impose dominance upon the other, and this is where the storm comes from, the friction created by the two orgone streams. So if you put that into the subatomic world, where you have two timelines, two quantum fluctuations, that makes a lot of sense, especially if you've had a situation. This has got me really thinking now. Especially on a situation where immediately after 9/11, there was a new wave function created, the post-world wave function, right? Post 9/11 wave function. Well, the standard world wave function continued on down here, right? So 9/11 went up here, right? So as the 9/11 one is starting to collapse towards where it should have been, and 9/11 never happened, friction is created. I like that idea a lot. I do. I think you've actually answered a question there for me. I was wondering.
oh, good.
I never thought. I just assumed that we'd sort of like notice changes as the two timelines corrected, and they came back in like a sine wave together, and we were back to where we should be. But there would be, when you think about it, if this one appears moving at so many cycles and this one's moving at lower cycles, when they would hit, there would be, of course, there would be friction. There would be. So maybe we're living in the time, and and this is what explains so many things. Like I noticed things got very started weird in my world around 2008, 2009. People started vanishing, personalities started changing, and it was like that right through until 2018, and then things really got strange, and they felt dark, really dark for the first time in 2018. And you might be that may well be the answer right there, that we're actually, like, as we're circling the drain of the Kali Yuga, the two timelines, the post 9/11 timeline and the word and the corrected timeline that we should be on, there would naturally be high senses of friction. There would actually, definitely would be some kind of quantum friction. So yeah, I think that's like a very plausible idea. Thank you for bringing that up, because now you put me off on a different tangent. I
Yeah.
think, yeah, that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, and where I read that at, I'm pretty sure it was the book Wilhelm Reich and Orgonomy. It's not a book written by him, but by one of his colleagues, by Ola Rockness. It's a fairly short book, but I'm pretty sure that's where I came across that whole theory, and uh, I was just mind blown by it. And I remember too in the book, they had talked about. I'm trying to remember. It's it's a Norwegian word, Sodgren or Sodgen, but it means the sowing of time. Or no, wait, no, it's the flickering of sowing time. So they were talking about how in the spring, when you look at the fields, you'll see this kind of blur over the fields, like it's heat rising up, but they call it the flickering of sowing time. And so yeah, he goes into that, but with the friction part, like I said, the friction is what creates the moisture, is what causes it to rain. And I remember in Norse mythology, the creation of the world, it was, and now I can't remember all exactly what had happened, but I know that there was Gnungagap. That was the space in between the the hot and the cold. I think between the world of fire, the world of ice, Muspelheim and Jotunheim, or something like that. I might be getting this wrong, but I
Yeah,
remember
lot
this
of
looked like
origin,
there's moisture.
yeah, a lot of origin stories are about friction of some kind, or a shift in a change. Like even Tolkien's concept of how Middle Earth came to be, that Erlu Uvatar created the Anor and they started singing, but Melkor sang in a different tune, and this created a kind of dualism that caused Middle Earth to form and become the complex society of event and world it eventually became. It was the friction of Melkor's song being different than the rest of the Anor. So it's everywhere. It's this concept of a there's a controversial Irish one. There's always been a story that there's no origin story in Irish mythology, but there was one by Lady Gregory that she claimed that she'd heard, though she never really gave the sources for it. But again, it's conflict. It's about a sea monster who comes onto the land and is torn apart on the land by a primal force. Again, there seems creation manifests out of what you were talking about, this friction, in all kinds of ways, not even psychological, even emotional, even, the truth of things is revealed during times of friction. Like
Yeah.
when two people have an argument, they will show their truth, that they will become unrestrained and show their true feelings for one another, like things they dislike about them will be blurted out. And that's caused by the friction, the honesty and the truth of that, the sort of unbridled Luciferian reveal happens because of the friction of the argument, that the chaos is what creates a kind of a truth.
Yeah, because when two people argue, it's really both of the people trying to work something out, and
Unless they're angry.
yeah.
Yeah.
But even then, they're trying to express their own viewpoint, their own truth, and
Yeah.
sometimes even a bit of moisture does come out of that. They cry. You
Yeah.
know, so
Yeah, absolutely. They call it a heated argument. Why they just, they associate it again with temperature and things like that. It
yeah,
is interesting. Now bring it back to minimal spaces again. This concept of the friction created, maybe the sense of unease and the sense of disjointed in betweenness within a liminal space is caused by the friction of our personality, of our own psychology, our own consciousness coming into contact with the void that it presents towards us. That there's a kind of a void element to a lot of these liminal spaces, but there might be one element in there that sort of throws you off kilter. Like it causes bewilderment. Like you go into a large hotel ballroom and it's empty, but there might be one white table in the far corner of the hall with the tablecloth still on it and the chairs around it. And you go, well, why is that there? Why have they moved all the tables out except that one? Who is that for? Stanley Kubrick was a master at portraying this kind of vibe in his movies of the liminal space. And so you're having a conflict. You see this. You're in. Okay, I'm in an empty ballroom. There's no one here. Why is there a table over there? There's a kind of a friction then begins because you're trying to rationalize the room should either be full of tables or have no tables. But why is there one table remaining? And it's that kind of thing that throws you off kilter, that probably creates that kind of like psychic friction within us that causes us to experience the liminal space.
yeah. And I remember I was actually thinking about this, trying to remember what my first experience of a what my first liminal experience would have been. And I remember I think one of them anyways. I was about 3 or 4. And I remember going in car rides, and I remember looking out of my window and trying to see the most far away tree that I possibly could. And I always thought to myself, I want to go there. And I remember getting this warm butterfly feeling in my stomach that I felt really, really excited. And I don't know if I'd say that might be more of an liminal state rather than a liminal space, maybe. I'm not really sure, but I still
At
remember that feeling pretty
that
well.
early age, you're probably stepping into consciousness. The way the whole Jungian idea that when we're a young child, some event happens in our lives, and we realize we're no longer a thing, that we're actually a person, we're actually a sovereign soul, we're actually a free thinking, independent entity away from the masses. And usually it happens at quite a young age where a child experiences this. Sometimes it's through trauma. Very often it's through trauma, but not always. Where suddenly what Jung calls stepping into consciousness. It happened to him when a boy drowned when he was a little boy. Another little boy drowned in the river near where he lived, and he saw the child's dead body, and it threw him into consciousness. Suddenly he wasn't an innocent baby anymore. That may have been your experience of that. That's probably what was happening to you then, that you were stepping into consciousness, that you're now, when you think about it, stepping into consciousness, like jumping out of the NPC state, really, when you think about it. You
Yeah.
think about an NPC would probably never have that experience of stepping into consciousness. They just go, oh, look, how old did you say you were? Like 3 or 4 or something? That's quite
Something
young.
like that. Yeah, I was about
Yeah.
that age.
An NPC, even as an adult, would just look at a tree and go, "Oh, tree, oh, tree in the distance." Where a
Yeah.
sort of a person who's stepping into consciousness would go, well, what does that tree mean? Why is it there? I want to be there. How do I get there? You know, that's
Yeah.
that those kinds of moments are the moments I think that we actually split from the NPCs. It's almost like that's when the soul really comes into us. It's like before that we're kind of a functional biological unit, but then something happens to trigger the soul, and the soul, I wouldn't say enters into us, but activates.
Yeah. It's like it breaks the mold.
Big time. Or you know, it's like a Russian nested doll. Like the real you is
Mhm.
down the middle, right? And then the bigger
Yeah.
dolls have to be removed, and there you are. I know who I am now, kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's how I see a lot of, hard times and struggles in life. Yeah, it's not pleasant to experience them, but at the same time, it's doing something to us. It's breaking us down to a to a purer and purer state. And in a way, it's kind of a blessing. Pain and
Well,
suffering. It's
not at the
oh, go
time,
ahead.
it's not. But you will always find that when you grew as a person, it was always the result of some problem, something difficulty, some challenge. I used to like the word challenges better because it
Hmm.
caused you to appreciate things, and especially yourself, that you rose to the occasion and you survived it. It also called upon skill sets within yourself that were required to deal with this situation, you know, and
Yeah,
then those skill sets would never have developed. It's the whole no pain, no gain thing, really, isn't it? If you had not have had confronted those challenges looking for a solution.
yeah, exactly. And I know that that same experience that I had when I was a kid of looking out my window and trying to find the most faraway tree that I could and wanting to go there, especially when I was a teenager, I would have many dreams about this, where it was just it. It wasn't exactly lucid dreaming. What's the other word for it? Where you have very vivid dreams. Oh, I have a
Like
lot of those, and I still do. And a lot of them would be about going off into the far wilderness, to the far reaches of the world, and sometimes even in space. And I always love those dreams. And, you know, on my channel, I do talk about my dreams a lot, or just about dreams in general a lot. It's something that has inspired my own skill set, my writing, my story,
yeah,
so
I'm a great believer in all that stuff. I've had some very strange experiences. I've had dreams that have come true, many of them, and I've
mhm.
had dreams. My dreams tend to be extremely symbolic. They're filled with symbolism, and it can be an enormous amount of fun going through your dream diary, or your dream journal, and trying to decipher the symbols in your dreams. In fact, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful experience because
Yeah.
it's almost like you're having them because your subconscious mind is trying to communicate something to you. Well, because your subconscious mind is older than you are, or older than anything, and doesn't communicate in the language that you speak, whether it be English or any other language, it communicates through symbols and metaphors and allegories. And I find in my life that's how I deal with the world around me. I literally am very much in that Joseph Campbell Jungian worldview of applying metaphor and mythological archetypes to everything. I
Mhm.
find life is much easier to deal with. I find life is much easier to deal with if I deal with things that have to confront as metaphors rather than directly, or especially things that are very powerful that I know I can't take on my own. But if I reduce them to a symbolic language when it's inside my own head, or even how I express about them, like during the lockdowns and the vaccination things, I was using terms that like code words like needlecraft and this kind of thing, and different code words with different
Yeah.
aspects. That came initially out of trying to get around the algorithms or the spies on YouTube that was censoring the videos. But it had another effect too. It actually shifted my consciousness and the people watching the videos, and they actually started to see it in a whole different way. When it, the whole thing of like, to name a thing is to bring it to life, but to give it your own name is to put, rather than have stewardship on you, you have stewardship on it. It's no longer, because you've actually broken the conventions that makes you subservient to it, by instead you giving it a new name in the kind of bardic sense, and then now you have ownership over it.
Yeah. And one of the things that I have found out is that whenever I go to write down my dreams, or sometimes even talk about them, that's when I notice the most when strange things happen, when shifts in reality happen. Like, it seems as if that more signs, more like even the wildlife. It was maybe about 3 weeks ago. Wildlife. It was from from all around, was just coming out, and just in very, seemed like, bold and meaningful kind of ways. And
Very interesting. This is showing that your prefrontal cortex of your brain is very highly developed. The prefrontal cortex here is where dream processing and things like symbolism and metaphor and allegory take place, just in this frontal area of the brain. It's where all the synapses are related to mirror neurons, and the neural partitions relating to the concept of something deeper than the robot. Like, the back of your brain is a reptilian robot. The frontal part is the kind of like higher elevated part. It's where the kind of artist and the dreamer lives. And you need, one of the things they discovered that psychopaths don't dream, or barely dream, is because their frontal cortex is shut off. The prefrontal cortex is shut off. So that's really what that is. You have it sounds like that it was like that from the time you were a child. That maybe your parents were similar, or maybe it was just something about you that just developed on a different world all by yourself. But that's a very good trait to have in terms of living. It's like, you can actually discover so much about yourself and get so much help from your subconscious mind from these kinds of dreamings. It's interesting. So you'll think about a dream, and it will amplify the lucid dreaming later on. Is that what you're saying?
something like that. When
Yeah.
it comes to lucid dreaming, I actually haven't yet mastered it or anything, but I have vivid dreaming, where my dreams, they feel extremely real, and it sometimes they can feel like that they go on for years. And it
Yeah.
just seems, it's hard to describe, but I can remember lots of little details. And it's not every single night that I dream that I can recall these vivid dreams, but just lots of little details that I'm writing it down, and it's pages and pages that I'm pouring out. And I don't know if, back to liminal spaces.
Well, that happened to me last night. I had a dream last night that kind of brings us back to the liminal spaces. I dream, and I always dream about houses, a specific house somewhere, and the house is always sinister, or it's my own house, and it's shaped differently, and or a building, and this kind of thing. And last night I dreamt I went into a building that was empty, and there was nothing in it, so it had that kind of liminal space thing going on, and the rooms were empty. And I was a child again, and I was told, this is your bedroom. And when I walked in, there was a picture of my face on the wall as an adult, pinned to the wall. So these are the kind of dreams that I have, and they're very symbolic. Now, me deciphering that, but I never deciphered the one dream the next day. I look for a few dreams. Like, I've been doing this kind of like this home house dream for like years now, and I'm still trying to figure out what it means. But it's like, it's very, very powerful. And when I have the dream, and here you go, when you hear this one, when I have that dream, or the dream related to the house, I'm filled with the same emotional resonance in my solar plexus, my feeling, my good feeling, that I have in a liminal space, like I'm in a building late at night and the only one in it. Now, isn't that interesting? It's almost like when we dream into the liminal world.
Yeah. I wonder about that. I know no, I've had dreams about this certain house, and it usually looks the same. On the inside, the rooms can be laid out a little bit differently, but yes, it does have a sinister feel to it. It's always a wooden house, always a thin wooden house, usually darker wood, but it's always like many thin wood planks. And it feels like the size of a mansion, and that I start off at the entryway and at the heart of the house, and it's kind of creepy in there. I kind of sense things are a bit off, and so when I go venturing deeper and deeper into the house, I go up the stairs or I go down into the basement, I start to realize that the furniture, that it looks older. There's more dust on it. And I start to realize that this furniture isn't mine. And then when I go deep enough, there's no more furniture at all. And if I go even deeper than that, it's just darkness, like a dark attic or very dark basement. And it has this feeling of that it goes on forever. But the deeper I go, the more afraid I get.
Well, that's definitely, as you go into the basements, that's definitely a classic Jungian concept, that you're going deeper into the archetypal self, into the subconscious mind, deeper into the core of you, not as only as an individual, but of your tribe, of your family, of everything, your ancestry. You're going deep into the core of that. And those house dreams are really, I'm really glad I had this conversation tonight, because now I'm seeing those house dreams are very much related to the concept of the liminal spaces and what we feel there. It's almost like we're dreaming out loud when we're in these liminal spaces, because I dream about buildings and houses like that all the time. And there's always a sense of, not always sinister. Like I've had the most terrifying dream of my life, in which an entity appeared in a house dream. But
What kind?
I had a dream, and this is about 10 years ago, maybe a little longer, about 11 years, 12 years ago, that I went into a building, and in the building there were people pulling through all the drawers and all the like filing cabinets, trying to get information, like they were spies or something. And suddenly this entity appeared, which for some reason I called it the electrical night jester, that produced an enormous sense of electricity. And it started to suck the energy out of every living thing in the room. It had a round top head with I'll send you a drawing of it. I've got an article on my old blog that I drew of it, and I'll send it to you, of a pole coming out of its forehead, and there was one eyeball on the pole, and the one arm was loose, and the other arm was holding the eye and looking like this. And these people who were in the building, who were basically looking for stuff, they were dissipated by this thing like ether energy. And I managed to escape by just getting out the door and closing it behind me. But it was the most terrifying dream of my life, because it had sensations. It felt like I was being electrocuted in the dream. And it involved a building and a house. I always dream about buildings and houses, and there's always a sense of puzzle and a sense of mystery and a sense of what's around that corner, what's in that room, what's upstairs, what's downstairs. Now, for years, I had a dream of a house that was like an American colonial house, like the Addams Family house, but not sinister looking, pretty. It's like it was all painted whitewash with dormers and beautiful windows, and at the top you had one of those, whatever you call them, those big dormers at the top, vestibule things. And I was always terrified to go to the third floor, If I went to the second floor, there was a sense of absolute terror coming from the third floor. But I knew on the third floor was stuff that I needed. I had to go there. But I was having my energy drained from me in the same way that electrical Nightchester character. And eventually I did go to the third floor, and that dream never happened ever again. Now, what force, and again, the houses are always empty, I'm the only one in it, other than that first dream where they were all dissipated. What compels me, what element, it's such a remarkable thing how the subconscious mind is, I get the feeling it's definitely trying to guide me, take me to understanding, but I have to figure out what the understanding is, because the subconscious mind talks in a symbolic language through dreams, but I operate in I'm not in left and right brain, but I operate in a verbal, literal world. And again, it's so similar to the liminal spaces feeling. It's like what's around that. I mean, I made that video you saw that I made recently. About the ultimate liminal space would probably be a long corridor in a shopping center, a shopping mall, with most of the stores all shut down and maybe the shutters pulled down. I see, a few fluorescent lights, and in the distance you can't see it, but around the corner is the flickering of electronic arcade and gaming machine, just flickering on and off. But you only see the light flickering, but you don't see the game machine itself. And that just randomly popped into my head while I was making that video, that imagery. But now I'm thinking that I probably had dreamed that in a dream. So it's almost like the liminal space and your dreams, they do merge into a kind of the same thing.
That would make sense. And so I wonder, would you say that maybe the way forwards is to go deeper into that liminal space, to go deeper into those scary places in our dreams? Like,
it must be. It's like a maze, and even like the way Stanley Kubrick used the maze in The Shining. It's like we're being beckoned. We're not, everything about both experiences beckons us. It's not about like we want to explore, we want to see. It's like those old dungeon crawling games and like Dungeons and Dragons. You want to go down the tunnels. You want to go down the dungeons. You want to go around the corridors. You want to see what's next. But there's a very powerful sense in these dreams that this is leading to something. I'm being led somewhere, and I have to go there. It's not throwing me into it. It's not forcing me into it. It's like an instinctual belief that I must go there. So what you said there about the liminal space, you're probably bang on. That it's rather than, okay, at the moment we observe the liminal space, we're aware of it, we know how it makes us feel, what effect it has on us, but maybe it's time to start diving deeper into the liminal space in order to find understanding, in the same way we'll go into that mysterious room in a dream.
right.
Actively look for them.
Sorry?
Actively look for liminal spaces. Actively look for them. Maybe that's what Stanley Kubrick was doing in his movies,
Maybe. So do you think then that it might be a good idea to maybe in your dreams to meet this electrical jester instead of running away? Do you think?
Not this one. I had an experience that was just very similar to what people describe alien abduction experiences or encounters with, dark, like Irish folklore encounters with like dangerous fairies. I definitely had that feeling, not that thing. But it was interesting that it destroyed the normies. Where I managed to get away. Was there a symbol in that?
Yeah, it kind of sounds like that the normies, they were trying to figure out how to get away from it. So they're going about it through a more logical process, going through the files, things that are more organized.
Yeah.
but you weren't doing that. You went about, I guess, the easier method, and just
Just made it. I just
got out of the
ran.
house. Yeah, yeah, just ran. So
Yeah, I
it's
think I
it's not
felt
easy.
I felt this energy beforehand. Like it's almost like I instantly understood danger while they needed time. Or it wasn't until it was actually consuming them they realized in the predicament that they were in.
So that does bring me to this end of a cycle, if it is nearing, or just whenever it does come to its end. If it is two realities battling each other, and one is trying to consume the other, and then they divide into equal ways to different ones, or to do ones. I know that I was somewhat recently told about that in Luciferian doctrine. It talks about this great apocalyptic fire, and this fire is information. And I don't know much about it though, but I still have been just speculating on it. Letting that idea kind of marinate. You know, if these two realities are colliding, creating that friction creates heat, fire. That fire, what is it? Is that information? You know, information from all this bewilderment. And I just wonder
Yeah, it's
if
like
it's
that. The story.
insanity.
Yeah, it's like there's we're getting back to the whole thing that chaos creates novelty, and novelty creates new realities. And again, I noticed like we have so much. I mean, everything is a response to technology. And when I was growing up, the chaos magic and the Discordia thing was very big, and a lot of that had to do with embracing modern technology and modern culture in order to create magical states. So where in the past, previous occultists would have used the the demons in the Goetia or the angels and this kind of thing, uh, in the Key of Solomon and similar things like Saint Cyprian's Grimoire, the chaos magicians, and they were correct as well. To their credit, realized well you could use things like everything from you could use superheroes, you could use anything. I can't, like a few years ago, I was really looking at the idea of chaos paganism, that paganism needs to progress in the same way that chaos magic progressed back in the 70s. That instead of like sitting in a field putting daisies in your hair and playing panpipes, that we have to live in the real world today. So we need an emerging paganism for this way, and that's what chaos magic was. The concept of that everything from video games to computers to novels to fanzines to electronic music was all the new form of sorcery, the new form of magic. And they were 100% correct about that. They were absolutely right. They were where you had people still doing Golden Dawn rituals in the 1980s and wondering why they weren't working. You had chaos people working in Discordia and chaos having tremendous amounts of success in changing, in manifesting, simply by using the abundant energy created by the modern world. I wrote a book called Sorcery, the Invocation of Strangers about this. Is that like the access to magic has never been easier, simply because of the enormous charge available to us that wasn't there in Victorian or earlier times. And so this enormous charge allows us to hack reality a lot easier, especially if we use contemporary tools. So, like what you were saying with the liminal space could be the modern version of a meditative pilgrimage in the Middle Ages undertaken across the landscape between two pilgrimage sites, between, say, a standing stone and a holy well. They may have experienced the same things that we're experiencing in walking down a long corridor in an empty school or university with most of the lights off. That we're having the same kind of pilgrimage, like the hermit card in the tarot, but in a modern sense. that we're having that in a modern sense, because magic doesn't go away. The occult, the esoteric doesn't go away, and it doesn't get locked in the past. So we're constantly having to find new tools. And that's what I was thinking. Like I wrote that article, and the concept of that's what the video was about. Yeah, there's loads of videos on YouTube about liminal spaces, but I was particularly interested in the concept of the liminal space as a conscious expanding tool. And I think in this conversation tonight, we've kind of proven it is, because look at the tangents that we've both gone on regarding the concept of an empty corridor in a shopping mall. So there's definitely an expansion of consciousness potential in there. So maybe this whole concept of liminal space is basically just, it ties over from the chaos magic of the 1970s and 80s.
Maybe. And, I do remember one video that you had. I think it was an older one, where you talk about the magical potential of analog devices compared to digital devices. Yeah. Do you think that? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, we're analog. There's no digital in this. The digital doesn't exist anywhere except created by human beings. In fact, the first digital signals were put out by the BBC back in the 1960s. They were transmitted by the BBC. They had an engineering workshop where they produced a string of digital code. It might have been the 50s or 60s, I'm not sure. But they literally produced a transmission made of ones and zeros. So it was the first time in the history of the universe that ones and zeros were sent off into space. And it may have the whole concept was that, looking back on it now, it was very, very dangerous, because it may have been the one radio signal that set off the alarms of a predatory alien species.
Because the Dark Forest.
Because
you're talking about
with the Voyager probe on the margins of the Voyager 2 is the first probe to reach intergalactic space, and it's producing signal. It's detecting signals from deep space that are very different than anything in our electronic magnetic spectrum. So, we've probably detected an alien civilization through or in some way through this strange signal, but we also set it off. But the digital signal is totally unnatural. In fact, because we're analog, our electrical, New Ages would talk about, we're bio-digital computers. We're not. We're bio-digital radio receivers and transmitters. We're very much analog because of the sine wave going like this, where in digital it's up, down, it's a square block. Now, in that severity between the amplitude of the sine wave, well, not a sine wave, the digital signal, the sudden collapse, the 1, the 0, the 1, the 0, this robotic function, this void is created, where the abyss lives between the amplitude of the peak of the 1 and the depth of the 0, and it's instantaneous within that sudden drop or sudden rise. Where if you have a sine wave, you have a gradual increase in an analog wave, and the attack and then the decay. So we entered into a very different reality when digital electronics was invented. And it may have been the thing that's causing all the problems today. We don't know.
Well, like what you were saying about the liminal space of walking into a conference room, and there are no tables in there except for that one table that's the chairs pulled up to it, and you're kind of sitting there wondering, well, who's that for?
It's like a bite of unresolved information.
Yeah, and that to me, that one table, it's kind of, it makes us see more of that analog sine wave, whereas the digital, zeros and ones, that's our expectation of, well, either the room should be empty or should be full of tables. This in between us, there's no room for that. So I kind of wonder, the digital frequencies, maybe that's having an effect, and maybe that could be part of the rise in autism. Where in autism, people they like things to be categorized, like it to be organized, very black and white. So I wonder,
it's interesting. And also, so That's what we could talk about. There's so many tangents we could go on. I've got to go shortly, but there's so many tangents we could bring this into. But it just goes to show you how, just in the hour or so we've been talking, how we've able to pour so many concepts into this one idea of the liminal space, which shows that this is an extremely important topic, and we're really only opening the Pandora's box of its potential.
Yeah, and maybe, like you said, this is the way forwards for paganism, is maybe to, to experience more of these little spaces, to go out and actively, look for them, maybe even to actively create them, making sure that we keep our dream journals, and just entering more and more in that space to develop our own pagan spirituality.
I agree with that, and I also agree that the Abrahamic mindset may well be the proto-digital concept, the good and the bad, the absolute good, absolute God, good, the one true God, all this kind of stuff. That was almost like the Gnostics were absolutely right when they spoke with the Demiurge and the concept of a God that was completely one or the other. There was no sense of flux of wisdom. It was purely just a wickedness. The whole concept of the hand that strikes you down, and that's the end of that. There was no way to mitigate or petition. Where in paganism, petitioning your gods is very much a part of it. Yeah, but paganism needs to start moving forward. Like you say, syncretic paganism. That's bang on. It should be like that, especially today, because it's all very nice having our old traditions and all this kind of thing, but we still have to live in the real world. How do we carry that into our daily lives? It's a thing that's not bothered me, but I've been definitely thinking about a lot over the years, in recent years, that I think it's an ongoing dialogue. I think people like you are having out there are like, okay, I'm a pagan, but it's a paganism that has to survive, and that pulls in like toolkits from other philosophies and so on. That's required, and I think a lot of pagans I know are like that by default anyway. They're very much the ones that I know here in Ireland and around Europe, and they tend to be like that. They tend to be sort of like they incorporate other philosophies into it. They're not like just like I'm a Nordic pagan or I'm a Celtic pagan, and that's the end of it, which is really what paganism is when you think about it. The ability to absorb other philosophies.
Yeah, and one of these philosophies that I've really taken to was Nietzsche. And I haven't read all of his books, but there's two right now that I've really invested myself into, and so it's a part of my own paganism, and it's part of the story that I've been writing. I create these little story episodes on YouTube, and as I write my story, as I create these videos, it's an expression of my own pagan spirituality, and that's that's kind of how I feel about David Lynch's work. That seems very pagan, but syncretic pagan.
H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah.
Big time. And what you were saying there about Nietzsche, I'll leave you just one final quote. Nietzsche thought he was an atheist, like Lovecraft thought they were an atheist, but Nietzsche was actually a pagan. I'm sorry, he was. His philosophy, his concepts were straight out of, like, particularly if they would have existed, he would have found great audiences in ancient Rome. He was born at the time of the Roman Empire. We'd hold him up there with like Plato and Marcus Aurelius, but he was almost like one of those guys born in the Christian era, in the Abrahamic era.
Yeah, I can see that. And I know you said too that during his time he was somewhat well known, but not very well known. But I remember in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he was talking about that. Well, essentially, he's not speaking for his time now, for the people of his time now. He's speaking for people of a of a future, or people of a future, like 100 years ahead or so.
Yeah, like Rudolf Steiner was really talking about the future. And maybe these kinds of internet videos we make, people like us make, maybe they are not for this time, but they're for a future time.
Yeah.
To be resolved down the road, because this whole thing of like we need instant resolution is really not a very pagan idea. The pagans are much more inclined to believe that it's something that will be resolved in time and with meaning and with understanding, rather than a miracle going snap. So,
exactly.
Can we wrap up now? I'm not being rude, but I have to go somewhere.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you so much for coming on to my show. Yeah, it was great talking with you about this, and yeah, just be sure to follow his work in the description below. I put links in there, and you have a good night.
Oh. Yeah, and let's do this again if you have want someone to talk about another time in a few months, because you've really got my head moving now on things, and maybe we'll have a better idea down the road. I'll send you that stuff on the electrical night jester, and you can have a look at that. But yeah, I think this was a good conversation and kind of important, and you got my gears moving regarding what I was trying to express as an engagement with the liminal space and as an expansion of consciousness. So I think you've definitely given me food for thought there, especially the Willem Wyk story. So thanks very much, and I'll see you, and take care.
Okay, thanks, and you too.